my tarot friends, it's Justin Michael. Welcome back. Hope you're having a happy holiday season and, of course, Happy New Year to you. It's been a couple of weeks since I made a video. I took a sort of an unannounced 2-week break because I just needed it. I had a lot going on with the holidays and everything, but hope everybody's staying well. And, of course, I'm back here with a long overdue video on a deck that I received probably about a month ago now, created by my friend Mendy Dunn at the Artistry of Tarot, which she's a YouTube creator also. I will leave her channel down below. Most of you probably know Mendy. But she's done a deck here based on a really significant historic deck, the Angelo Valla. In an interesting area it was created. So this is roughly the end of the 18th century, 1790 is the original. We've seen it printed by a guy named Peter Ortman previously. This is a very rare deck to come by, but a lot of people do have it. It's just kind of hard to track down. But he called it the Lombard Tarot. And unfortunately, I don't have the facsimile to show you, but I do have black and white images in the book. And you can see it's very, very close. It's based almost exclusively on this deck. I do know Mendy added some little details, like for instance, she handwrote the titles. She chose the colors. She changed some little aspects here and there, but it stays pretty true. Also, another thing she did was she made it fit a standard tarot pattern or card layout rather, which is a little wider than what we see with some historic cards. But I couldn't figure out why it was called the Lombard Tarot. Because this Trieste is almost the Baltics. It really is the Baltics. It wasn't really affiliated with any of the Italian kind of city-states. Historically, it was always a part of the Austrian Empire or the Holy Roman Empire. It was always under Habsburg rule. I just did a little bit of research on the country or the region rather, and it's just very interesting. So from the 1300s, it was under the control of Austria. And it was declared a free port or free zone by I think Charles VI. In the Renaissance period, in that maybe the 1700s or something, but I don't know the specifics all that well. But it was around the time this was printed. It was almost its own thing. It was part of the Austrian Empire, but yet it was a free port. I guess free of taxes for commerce and things because it was a big hub. It had this amazing port. That I think was built by the Romans. Actually, was established way back in Rome, but it was very significant, and so it was not a part of modern day Italy until the 1950s, actually. So I think I want to say after World War II, it was split between two zones, Trieste. Zone A and B, it was under British and American control on one side, and on the other side it was Slovenia or something, or maybe it was the Russians, I don't know. But ultimately in the 50s it was given to Italy. I don't know too many details, but it's a very unique place. So it's almost like a Slavic country or a Slavic city. But they do speak Italian there for the most part. It's a very multicultural place. A lot of Serbs settled there in the 18 and 1900s, from Serbia, and they created this very successful kind of little community. Just read bits and pieces about it, but it's not your typical deck from Italy. It's a very unique place, Trieste. So I don't understand why they would call it Lombard. There was a period between 1815, I think, that it was a part of Lombard Venetia Kingdom. I think at least part of Trieste was, but that was very short-lived, And so there was something I came across, reading on the internet that at one point people considered all of northern Italy Lombard. So it's possible with that too. Who really knows? I thought possibly it was either an error, and I asked a few historian friends. It was either an error, written down somewhere that it was Lombard, or it was maybe the pattern that they were referring to. He just thought that the pattern resembled the Lombard Tarot. So I did pull out the Soprafina just to show you a little bit of, and it's not exactly the same. People are probably wondering why I'm even showing it, but because this is kind of a whole different ballgame. But you will see in terms of like the position of the figures and all the symbolism is there, and you'll see that. And I also have another deck too, created by Giacomo Zoni. So this was about 1790, the end of the 18th century, and this was about 1780, about 10 years before that, from Bologna. Very, very close. So I'm going to show you bits and pieces of that, but I want to talk about the cardstock before I do that. So this is actually, the deck is available on Make Playing Cards. This is Mendy just created. She likes to create things. She's very much into art, and she just likes projects. Like right now, I think she's doing like mandolins or mandalas, not mandolins, mandalas or something like that, and she's very into that. So this was something she just was into for a while, in terms of creating, and she decided to share it with people who were interested. And like I said, the link will be down below. But so this is not the standard cardstock that you would get on Make Playing Cards, which is usually like the S30, which I have here. This is substantially thicker. This is a newer kind of cardstock that they're offering now at Make Playing Cards, and I wanted to try it out. And Mendy actually ordered me one as a favor. She may make it available. I'm not really sure, but just to give you an idea, we're going to take a look here. Just to show you exactly the difference. Okay, so this is about 0.30. I think that's probably why they call it the S30. It's always off a little bit because it's digital. And this is probably roughly 0.40, or 0.33 and 0.43, something like that. It's 0.10 difference, but it's substantially thicker. Feels like almost like a really sturdy U.S. Games deck. It's a little sturdier than U.S. Games actually, but it slides really well. The finish is great. Still Make Playing Cards. So, in terms of shuffling, you could easily riffle shuffle these, no problem. It's just thicker, and I really like that. It really works for me. In terms of the tin, because I remember Mendy said, "Oh, it's not going to fit in the tin." I actually found out that it does fit in the tin. It's just a little snug. And it's not awkwardly snug or anything. It actually fits okay. It's just the cards come out of it a little bit. They're raised, but the lid itself is raised. So if you're just careful, putting the lid on, it fits fine. I mean, it fits absolutely fine. And it sits flush against it. So, it's actually nice in that it'll keep the cards from warping probably. So I'm going to order a little label to stick on this ultimately. But very pleased with the quality of it. I love this new cardstock. We're going to take a look very quickly. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the Soprafina, which was 1830, Carlo della Rocca and Gutenberg. Probably the most beautiful tarot decks ever created, certainly in Italy in this time period, I think. I mean, it's probably one of the most beautiful. And what's cool about the Lo Scarabeo version is it comes with a little book. So this is the Lo Scarabeo Soprafina. I'm only going to show you some of the majors, but it comes with this book written by Riccardo Mendy, his name is. And it gives a whole history of tarot in Lombardy. And I drew on that because, Peter Ortman did call it the Tarot of Lombardy, and I thought, I just kind of want to learn a little bit about the history of it. He argues, Mendy, that, so tarot starts in Milan, in the 15th century with the, the hand-painted cards, right? The Visconti. As in terms of printed cards, he states in the essay that the patterns that were being printed in Milan after that, like in the 15 and 1600s, were almost identical to what we see in the Tarot de Marseille, in the later century. And that's why sort of Dummett and Michael Dummett, wrote a book called The Game of Tarot, mentions a sheet called the Carry Sheet, which I've shown on my channel before. I mean, you can Google that and look at it, but it's a sheet from the year 1500 that looks almost identical to what we see in Tarot de Marseille with some differences, and so it's just very interesting, right? So when you look at this deck, you're like, is this Tarot de Marseille? Because, it has the French titles. This one, of course, has Italian titles. But I don't know it's fair to call it a Tarot de Marseille because, there was a culture of printing tarot well before in Milan. And Marseille the Tarot de Marseille probably came to came to France from Italy. The French titles, I think, are explaining that because, and Mendy kind of talks about this a little bit in that, card making kind of disappeared in Milan in that period, in the 1600s because of some economic policies imposed by, there was a monopoly imposed by the Spanish, I think, in some period that made it almost impossible for card makers to print them, and printing kind of left for places like Venice and Bologna. And so that's where this was printed. This is Giacomo Zoni from Bologna. And then this is, like I said, Trieste, totally different. Geographically, it's almost in Slovenia, and then, of course, it comes back later on after the Napoleonic era comes back to being printed in Milan again. So I think we have documentation, there are certain, I guess, finance kind of leaders in some of the duchies and city-states saying that they want to make cards as well and nice as they're made in Lyon in France, because Lyon was the big kind of producer in France. So it's very possible that the pattern itself was Italian, but the Italians were writing French on their. This is just my opinion. I could be easily wrong about this. If you have an alternate opinion, please leave it below. But I think it's very possible that they just were writing the titles in French because, they looked like fancy French cards, and it was like a marketing thing, I think. It's very possible. So, because that's the only reason I could think of them doing it. Unless, of course, there is a theory that tarot died out completely in Italy, in northern Italy, and was reintroduced. But I don't think it died out completely everywhere. And so who knows? Maybe it's a little bit of both. It's probably a little bit of both. Maybe it did die out and then was brought back by the French or made popular again by the French. Kind of like how the British reintroduced rock and roll to America. You know what I mean? Or reintroduce the blues to America or something like that. You know what I mean? It's very possible that those things kind of happen in history. We don't know the full picture because we don't have all the information. We do have we have the carriage sheet. We have cards that were found in the castle, the Sforza castle that were, from Milan, where they had this very similar world card that we see on Type 1 Tarot de Marseille, things like that. So there's little bits of evidence. Theory de Polis talks about that in his Tarot de Marseille essays, which are great. But we don't have a full picture. This little essay written in here is perfect. It's great. If you have this deck, check it out. It's very interesting. It gives you a little bit of idea of how tarot may have unfolded later on in Milan. And so if you look now, you look at these three decks, you're like, okay, these two are very similar. And I don't have a facsimile of the original, unfortunately. And it's very true to the original in a lot of ways. There are some original kind of or unique things that Mendy added, which I will mention. And then so you look at the Sopraffina here, which is probably one of the most beautiful tarot creations ever. I mean, really state of the art of its time. But the position of the Bagato, or the Batelier, is very similar, except that he's holding a cup. He has the hat and everything. But it's just kind of cool to look at. And so this is, I just pulled it out just to see, because it was referred to as Lombard tarot, But I saw some interesting things that I thought it was, would be interesting to show in a video. Okay, so now we have the Papes, very similar here. The Papes and these two. And if you look at this, this is fancier, but she's wearing, the same hat. She has the book. She's kind of seated the same way with the robe and everything. It's just a little bit fancier. So, but of course, this is in Italian and not French. So let's see here. So now you have the Empress, which really interesting that almost like you see in Type 1 Tarot de Marseille, where the Empress has wings, which is, you see that a lot in Justice, but it's just really interesting. Okay, so in Type 1 Tarot de Marseille, in some decks, like I believe it's in the Dodal, you do see like winged type backs, you know what I mean? But it's just a chair back that kind of looks like wings. But in this deck, they've made it look like wings, and it kind of doesn't make sense because like the Empress, why does the Empress have wings? But it could have just been, either. Who knows what the engravers were thinking when they did that? But I like it, and you see it also in the De Auto deck. Which is the mid 17th century tarot from Rouen, and you see it in possibly the Van den Boer. I don't know if it's in the Van den Boer or not, but you do see it occasionally. Okay, so now we have the Emperor. Now this Emperor is interesting because if you look at the ancient Italian tarot, it's a totally different Emperor, and I think the Dodi also has a different Emperor. It's just a different face, but they're sort of seated the same way, doing the same thing. What I found interesting was, of course, they're seated the same way, right? But you have an actual swan next to him that he's kind of holding his hand on, and then here you have the shield with the swan on it. I think that's a swan. I'm not really sure 100%, but... And I just love what Mendy did with the Emperor. I really love it. Looks great. Okay, so now here we have the Pope, and you can see the similarities. And also, one thing I did notice too was, well, not exactly, but same hat kind of in the Type 1. But different kind of, you have that papal crozier, but still very similar. I mean, you can see the circles and things. I mean, drawn the same way, and even here too. It's just a fancier version, basically. I found that really interesting. Okay, and so this is another one that's very, very Type 1, which is you have the angel flying from right to left. And somewhat blindfolded. I mean, he's blindfolded in this one, right? But he has the blindfold here, but they're not covering the eyes. And so this, of course, is the Jean-Pierre Payen. And you can see, actually here, he even has that kind of crash helmet looking thing going, whereas the strap there, and obviously I got some flack one time for saying crash helmet, but that's actually what Theory to Paul is called in the essay, and I repeated it, and since he pointed it out, I kind of see that crash helmet, but I know it's obviously not literally a crash helmet, it just looks like one, but, still, it's kind of cool, and so you see that there in this card, not quite in this, or in this one, but blindfolded, and also, so you have the king. Well, this I don't know. It could be a queen, but you could have a male and maybe an androgynous looking king, and maybe his mother or his girlfriend. I don't know, but you have a man, two men, and basically a woman. And here you have the king, and same thing here. So, and that's not always like that in the Lovers card, because sometimes you have two lovers, sometimes you have two women and one man. So it's always a bit different, depending. But I love that. I love that card. She did very well on the Lovers card. Okay, Chariot, also very Type 1-ish in terms of Tarot de Marseille, with the kind of curly little curtain there, or canopy. So you can see the similarities. Same thing here. You have that curly canopy there. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's just in a different style, but it's kind of the same in a way. Okay, now we have Justice, which you can tell, I mean, are actual wings. They look like actual wings, more so in this. And I think that that's very clear, And that also makes sense, too, like the angel, the angel of justice or whatever. I mean, it just makes more sense. Same thing with the Hermit. You have the figure walking in the same direction with the stick, different kind of lamp in all three, but still a lamp and still kind of doing the same thing. I found it interesting too, looking at the Emperor here, if I can find it really quickly. Not the Emperor, the Hermit. So the Hermit here actually looks more like the Milano deck, the Soprafina, and then he has the big beard and he's kind of balding. You know, some people say that looks like Jodorowsky or Jodorowsky, but you know, you can see kind of the similarities. You know. Okay, here's another one too, and this is very interesting when we're looking at the wheel, because you know, you have kind of the same thing going on with the torch in all three of these, but in the Tarot de Marseille, okay, yeah, so when you look at the wheel here, okay, of you know, this is the Payen, you can see that this is kind of similar to that, and the flame in the Tarot de Marseille, which you have here and here, has become almost like an animal's tail, you know. But I don't know if that's the tail or if that's the flame behind the animal. It kind of looks like another animal with a tail. I don't know. You know, who knows why the engravers did those things. Could have just been to make it unique, make it a little different. Because they're all kind of a little different, but they have that flame there, that torch, you know, which is almost there, but not quite. But you still have a similar type of character there, whereas here you have an actual kind of figure, more realistic figure. And strength. So we're going to look a little quicker here. I love the Hangman. I think it was well done. The colors, love his little cut. You know, it looks like a little spiky kind of crew cut. I love that. And the one thing I notice here is that the legs aren't crossed, and some people give me flack for that because I always say that there's meaning in the crossed legs. But you know, of course, it probably was never intended that way. But you know, the cards were never intended to have divinatory meanings either. They were game cards for the most part. Now they of course have meaning in a lot of other ways. And I think they worked out very well for divination for that reason. Okay, so we have Temperance. Again, like an angelic figure. Very, very beautiful. You know, you can see the similarities. The Devil's quite different in the Soprafina, but in this one, very, very similar. And you can see very similarities. I'm not going to pull it out again, but the similarities with the Devil in the Type 1. You know, no face in the belly or anything, but the similar kind of wings, and you know, it's very cool. You kind of see relations even with other devils too, like in some of the like the Fin de la Tour and all those characters, you know, kind of like the giant devil. You know, when you get familiar with these cards, you start to see kind of influences in other areas. You start to see the big picture of it, and it's kind of nice, you know. That's why I like doing comparisons, because you can kind of, a picture's worth 1,000 words, you know. So the tower is interesting because, you know, in the Type 1 tower, you got the sort of the sun shooting out. It's like light shooting out of the tower towards the sun. And I'm trying to find it really quickly, but I'm not. Yeah, so you can see, I mean, that's like fire shooting out of the tower towards the sun, whereas here you have lightning coming from the sun, and also it kind of looks like lightning here. It's an arrow, and this is also lightning. But what's interesting is that, you know, these are earlier decks, and I don't know, it's kind of before electricity was common knowledge and how it worked, so maybe that's why we see the sun involved with lightning, because it was like a form of light, and I guess they thought that all light came from the sun. Whereas in this later deck, in 1830, I don't know if this is true or not, but in 1830 you have, you know, lightning coming from the lightning clouds. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but I just noticed that in tarot decks it tends to look like the lightning comes from the sun. I don't know if that's supposed to be lightning or what, but it looks kind of just like fire. But, you know, it's interesting. So, okay, and we have the beautiful star. I mean, is that not? I mean, that star is so beautiful in the Soprafino. It's got to be one of the most beautiful cards ever in tarot. Okay, so the Moon, Mendy did a tremendous job coloring this. I gotta say, this is probably my favorite card in the whole deck, along with the Fool I also like as well, which I'll show you. And more or less that has sentimental value to me as well. Okay, we have the Sun. Judgment, I mean, the same image going on, you know. And the World. Okay, so these two are more in line with, like, you know, the dancing woman figure, as opposed to the Type 1 Tarot de Marseille, you know, more rustic looking world figure. You know, but it's kind of cool. This is kind of a cross between the two, actually. And I love how she did the animals. They look really great. The bull and the lion. Love that. Another beautiful card, too. Okay, and so here we go. Last but not least, we have the Le Fall, which is really interesting. For one, you know, this will, I think the butterfly was added. That's kind of inspired by some of the Piedmontese decks, but also Mendy really loves butterflies too, I think, because she created the butterfly Lenormand. What's cool about this is that she added a little clover for me, because I had mentioned that I love clovers. I mean, most of you all know. And she put that little clover in there as like a nod to me for helping her with some advice and stuff. So thank you for doing that, Mendy. What a wonderful job you did with this deck. And I am going to now put these two away, and I'm going to show you the rest quickly. And I just really love, she did a wonderful job with this, and I'm so glad to have it. I can't wait to start reading with it. The pips were done really, really well. I mean, really well. And you can get this on Make Playing Cards for like a reasonable price. She's not making any money on this. I think it's just at cost, just kind of to share it. Okay, the Two of Cups is interesting because it has some Italian on there, you know, which is the stamp of where it was printed, you know. But anyway, Cups came out beautifully. She enjoyed doing the round suits, I was told. The swords were like a bit of a challenge, but they came out wonderful. I think they just came out amazing. I mean, look at that. That Two of Swords is really beautiful. So, I mean, I would imagine it's just a lot of tedious work, you know, because you know, I've done it myself, so I know. It's a bit of tedious kind of details, you know, time consuming more than anything. I love the Two of Pentacles, how she added her name on there, very kind of Tarot de Marseille-ish, and then she added the numbers in, and then also the date 2021. I mean, really, really beautiful. This is a fun deck. I'm going to really enjoy using this. I love this version, the cardstock rather. It's just great. This is definitely up there. I haven't spent too much time with it yet because I had it sitting waiting to do my little review of it, and I haven't been shuffling and reading with it, but I'm going to do that starting today. So thanks anyway. I would love to hear from you guys. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. All the links for everything is going to be down below, including Mendy's channel, the store you can be purchased at, and so on and so forth. And of course, love to hear from you if you have any questions or anything, comments. Until next time, everyone, love and peace. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.